But now, if you listen to other shiurim that we give here, especially if you listen to shiurim that Zohar, but other things besides that, all of these shiurim have one thing in common, and they have to do with what we do with our time, how we handle time. Time, time is the subject of Jewish astrology. The question is that he's posed is Jewish astrology, how does it work out in terms of Jewish law? Everybody knows a Jewish law. And not only that, but if you want to learn Torah, which the person that I want to do, you will need to go to yeshivas. You won't find this material there. So this material, as well as the Zohar, are not going to be found in most yeshivas unless you make your way there to Israel. Then you could find. But astrology, not so easy to find. Rabbi Yaakov tells a story about that when he was learning in, there's a great Kabbalah yeshiva called, I don't know, it's Rabbi Mordechai Atiyah. So I don't know what the name of the yeshiva is right this minute. And there was a teacher came in, and this is his story, and he said, and this teacher's from Afghanistan. So he's also reputed to be a great astrologer. And from the United States, already, Rabbi Yaakov Kronenberg was very interested in astrology, had to become an astrologer, but he needed to know more, like we always need to know more about this. And this rabbi said to them, the class, everybody wanted to learn a little astrology. So the rabbi said to them, look, if I teach you astrology, you're not going to learn Kabbalah, and we're here to learn Kabbalah. And that's what they did. But what you get out of this story is that there are not too many sources that can actually bring you into Jewish astrology. And here's one great one. This is Jewish Astrology and Cosmic Science, Torah, Talmud, and Zohar works, and he's done a fantastic job up to this time. Let's read on, and let's see where he's holding right now. So let us go back to the story of King Chezkiyahu. In Hebrew, it's well, I guess pretty close to that. He was one of the righteous kings of Judea, but there was a decree on him to die. He prayed to God, asking him to nullify the decree, even though the prophet Isaiah came and told him about this prophecy that he would die. There is no way out for yourself. And yet King Hezekiah got a life extension of 15 years. And Rabbi Avraham is going to talk about this a little, and he's going to explain it. He says, we do not see that he removed the planetary power and didn't nullify the sign rulership. Now, we got to go over these words. He did not see that he removed the planetary power. Now, he had mentioned that yesterday. Because, in other words, let's say that what would be the time, one of the planets that would indicate death, perhaps Mars. And so perhaps I'm not an astrologer, I'm just a student. So he said, but at any rate, this is not removed. The planet itself is not sent out of orbit and didn't nullify the sign rulership, and the fact that Mars appears in Aries and appears in Scorpio, that it didn't stop that either. The Bible doesn't say that the planetary power or the sign of rulership were removed, as is mentioned in the book of Kings. Rather, he said, I am adding on to your life 15 years, without nullifying any planet or anything. And similarly, with the daughter of Rabbi Akiva, who God saved from death, Rabbi Akiva didn't say that God nullified the rulership of the constellations. Rather, he expounded charity saves one from death. Tzedakah tatzil memavis. And the Jews are not under the planetary influences. So even though the rulership and the testimony of the constellations still existed, and they were testifying that that's what's going to happen, he's going to die, the decree was nullified due to the act of Rabbi Akiva's daughter giving charity. So the astrological testimony was overridden because charity saves from death. And the Jews are not under the planetary influence. But when a decree had been decreed upon the nations of the world, God first nullified the planetary powers. And it is not so with the nations of the world. So he says this is different when it comes to the Gentiles. He says, rather, we see the decree that came on the generation of the flood. God said, remove one star from the constellation of Kima. So Kima could be like Taurus. I'm not sure what that is. He's quoting now. Or maybe one star within the constellation of Taurus. And bring on the flood, because the flood would not have come to the world if the influence of that constellation hadn't been nullified. And the star Kima, which is probably in the constellation of Taurus, hadn't been removed. In other words, in order to bring the flood, God had to get rid of Kima, which probably holds the amount of rain that comes down to Earth. So maybe that's what it affects. This planetary influence can affect the amount of rain. So after the star was taken away, the flood could start. He didn't remove the star from any other constellations because the flood was in the month of Iyar, because Iyar is where Taurus is, another word for Taurus. So he didn't remove it from any other god because the flood was in the month of Taurus. He said, so he says, where Taurus rises in the east, or in the month of Cheshvan, where Taurus sets in the west, because the rabbis argued over in which of these 2 months the flood took place. Now, this is a different question. He's actually going to deal with this later. In these 2 months, Taurus rises and sets and rules over the rains and the thunder, and testifies concerning all the increases and decreases in every year, according to all those vested in astrology. Because the flood was in the days of the rulership of Taurus. From there, it was said, remove a star from Taurus and bring the flood. If the flood was in the month of Iyar, which is May, remove the star from Taurus, which is rising, and if it's in Cheshvan, remove it when it's setting. Now, all of these phrases, I'm not sure I'm listening to them. I'm not sure that I understand what the rising and the setting means, but we're hearing it. All this is to make known that God only nullifies the planetary power, which rules at that specific time, and which in the future he will reinstate or nullify on the nations. But on Israel, God does not have to nullify the planetary powers because the planets do not rule over Israel. So let us go back again. He didn't remove from any other constellation. He didn't remove the star from any other constellation because the flood was in the month of Iyar. Now that's a quote, which is the 2nd month of the Hebrew year, starting from Nisan. But actually, that is if you count from Nisan being the 1st month, which is basically April, and then May, which is Iyar, comes next. But actually, there are 2 ways to count the Hebrew year. So this is important. One is from Nisan, which is around April, when it is counted according to the months, and the other is from Tishrei, which is the time of Rosh Hashanah, which is around October. And the 2nd month may be Iyar, where Taurus rises in the east, in the eastern horizon in the morning, or it could be Cheshvan, which is Scorpio, where Taurus sets in the west, in the evening. Now, the significance of this, I need to file this away, so maybe I'll hear the answer to exactly what he's telling me. For me, personally, my son I was born on the 1st of May, which is Taurus. So, on the other hand, I have a lot of involvement in Scorpio, which is the opposite side of the horoscope, which is if Taurus is in the north, Scorpio is in the south. If Taurus is the spring, then Scorpio is the beginning of darkness, or the dark time of the year, which is winter. So there are 2 different opinions as to when the flood started and what was the 2nd month. When we use this word 2nd month, you have to know when you're counting from, Iyar or Cheshvan. Is it the time when the flood started and what was the 2nd month? Is it the time of Scorpio, when Taurus sets in the west, or when Taurus rises in the spring? Scorpio sets. He says, I think he means Scorpio sets. Scorpio rises in the beginning of the rainy season. So if you're talking about the land of Israel, in Israel, it doesn't rain in the summer. It doesn't rain from the spring to the summer. It only rains starting in Scorpio, which is usually, say, let's say, October, November. So because this world has to function in a natural way of natural rules, some planetary influences had to be removed in order to enable the rain to really fall and have a major flood. In other words, the testimony of the planets for the nations is always established, but if God wants to do something against it, he removes their power and influence of that planet or some planets. So we're going to stop here. This is Baruch at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and it's very deep, and we're going to run along to it, and we'll try to get more and more. This is Compendium. It's got lots and lots of stuff in it, and this is the Tikkun Elevator Kollel.